Yes, everybody, welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me from the Smith Center in Chapel Hill, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ just saw Carolina pick up the 88-79 win over Syracuse on senior night, Carolina's final home game of the season. Carolina improving to 22-8, 14-5 in conference play. Syracuse dropping to 15-15, 9-10 in ACC play, AJ. And honestly, if you would ask me an hour and a half ago, I don't think I would have thought we'd be starting, maybe 2 hours ago now because of the overtime, that we would have been starting with Caleb Love as the first thing we're going to be talking about here, especially in terms of what we're going to be talking about. But once again, AJ, we saw Caleb Love step up late. Looking at his first half stats, just 5 points, 2 for 9 shooting at the half. Really poor first half, really poor. It was even the first 10 minutes of the second half weren't great. Ends up with 21 points. 15 of those came in the final 11 minutes and 43 seconds. AJ, I put this tweet out at halftime. I said, I have this feeling that Caleb Love, for some reason, I just threw it out there, threw a shot in the dark, that is going to have a good second half is the word I think I said. And about 8 or 9 minutes into it, I put out a tweet saying that's just a horrible tweet because it just wasn't true. And then 10 minutes later, Caleb Love's, literally pretty much single-handedly willing this team to victory, not only towards the end of the second half with a big shot he hit, and then obviously what he did in overtime. So just a tremendous performance from Caleb Love down the stretch after a really, really poor start from the sophomore guard. But, I mean, we've had conversations like this before, AJ. This is almost in some ways who Caleb Love is at times, and we saw it once again tonight.
Poor shooting. I don't think it was a bad floor game. He did take some bad shots in both halves, and certainly early in the first half. You're going to get that with him sometimes, and he's been open about discussing how he's working on that. He sees the film, he's like, okay, there's one, there's another one, there's another one. Well, I got to fix that. He's been very open about it. I think he has fixed it. This is a tough game for a guy like him. He kind of wants to get at it and kind of take guys on and create for himself and score in myriad ways. And the way that Syracuse plays that zone, that can take that element away from a guard like Caleb. Mm-hmm. We didn't see RJ get in the lane a lot either on the break a couple of times. But so that element was taken away. And I think that for a while, he was sort of playing uncomfortably, but he didn't have any turnovers when he started finally scoring. In fact, I tweeted it out at some point what he was at that point in time. And I also started writing a note. By the way, I have like 19 entries in the 5 keys, in the 5 takeaways right now. But one of them I started writing at about the 9-minute mark. It was 9:09. There was a timeout, and they were reviewing something. And at that point, he was 2 for 11 with 5 points, but he had the 3 assists and no turnovers. And so I was tracking it. I was like, okay, well, if they win this game, it'd be pretty impressive that Armando has a rough shooting night and just missed a lot of stuff around the rim. Caleb doesn't go crazy from the perimeter, and they still beat a decent team in a game in which they're pushed. And all of a sudden he takes off. And the thing is, this is not the first time. People got on him for that bungle play he made late at Louisville, but what did he do in overtime? He hits the first 3. He was tough down the stretch at Clemson. Even the Pitt game when they lost, he scored 15 points in 3 minutes and 50 seconds inside the last 5 minutes or so of that game that put Carolina in position to maybe steal one that they had no business winning. He's done this late. He steps up late. He is unflappable. He's got moxie. He's unflappable. The pressure doesn't get to him. He doesn't feel it. He's got an incredible amount of confidence. And sometimes that's why he shoots some of the shots he does, because he thinks everything's going in. And, his game will eventually, on a more consistent basis, catch up with his confidence. But there's nothing wrong with the guy having the confidence. And we've seen his game grow. Anybody who doesn't think he's grown since last year, you're not paying attention, or you know nothing about the sport. So he has made a lot of progress. And the game itself is catching up to the confidence. And we saw that tonight. He was huge. He was big. And, one of us, I was joking with another writer on Press Row about Caleb's numbers, because we were talking about it inside that 9-minute mark when he was 2 for 11 and 2 for 12 and 2 for 13 and 2 for 14 and 2 for 15 from the floor. Like, good gracious, Caleb going to shoot him out of this game completely? and then boom. And then boom, he hits that three at the end of regulation. I kind of thought with him taking that shot, I'm like, there's no way Hubert drew up that shot. So I figured Hubert just said, look, guys, take the first wide open shot that you get. Caleb was so cold. Syracuse laid off, or they just didn't rotate well. And they left him wide open, and boom, he knocked it down because he's got that in him. That's part of his DNA. And then he hit a big three in overtime, and he hit a lot of free throws tonight. So, Carolina fans sort of have a love-hate thing with Caleb. And Armando even laughed. Somebody asked him when some of these shots he takes, is it one of those no, yes, yes, yes things? And Armando joked and laughed and said, yes, it is. So you're going to get that with Caleb Love as he continues to grow. You and I talked about this maybe a week ago. He's on a process. Caleb Love hasn't met the expectations of most Carolina fans, but that's okay because it doesn't matter what their expectations are. And it matters what his expectations are, what Hubert's expectations are, what his teammates expect of him, and the people that are in his close circle. And he's been a much, much better player this year than he was a year ago. And man, when he's high end, he's high end. By the way, they're now 9-0 when he scores 20 or more points. For North Carolina to be a team that can be dangerous in March, and it will be March in an hour and 27 minutes. They need Caleb Love to have stretches like we saw tonight because he's kind of a streak player like Brady's a streak player. They need that to show up every night. They do that. If that happens this weekend in Durham, they can win that game. They can beat a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because, man, he's a money player. He's a dude. We've talked about them not having screw you guys. Well, I think that there's an element of screw you in Caleb's game where he just tells the opposition, screw you. You can't stop me. I'm going to score. These guys are coming for a ride for a while. And he took them for a ride tonight, and it was to the winner's circle. And it was the biggest win of the year because it would have been the biggest loss had they not lost. So big time performance by Caleb Love.
Yeah, when he's on, he's fun to watch. And I know Carolina fans would probably say when he's off, he's about as frustrating as it gets to for them. But and I'm sure some Carolina coaches would say it as well. But
Hubert was asked that. And Hubert's like, look, everybody's like that. They're college kids. But because Caleb's so ball dominant.
Yes, true, yeah.
He's a guy that when he scores, he's got the ball for a while before he scores, except that he hit a three in overtime or late in the first half. He hit a three that was a catch and shoot three. I think Leaky got an offensive rebound and kicked it out to him. And it was one of those ones where he didn't have to wind up. He just caught and shoots a rhythm shot. And a lot of people in basketball will tell you the easiest three to hit is a kick out because you can step into it. You catch step. It's what you do most of the time when you're shooting around. And that kind of got him going a little bit and hit some big shots. So he's an interesting ball player to watch, man. You kind of see a little bit of everything with Caleb. And the Tar Heels are very fortunate they saw a lot of the good over the last 11 minutes of this game tonight.
Yeah, they definitely did. I'm going to run through some stats real quick before we move on to the second thing. Brady Manick on senior night. No, he's only had 1 year, but technically senior night for him still 22 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Caleb Love, 21 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. No turnovers for Caleb Love as well. Armando Bacot, 17 points, 18 boards, 23rd double-double of the season. RJ Davis, 17 points, 5 assists. Leaky Black with a solid all-around game, 2 on senior night. Even though I was on there, I saw you try to get more out of Leaky in his post. We'll talk about this in a second, in the press conference. We'll talk about that in a second. But Leaky Black, 8.7 boards, 7 assists. Seniors were big tonight, AJ. That's kind of the second thing I want to hit on in here. I know there isn't a lot on this team. And I know one of them's only been here as a graduate transfer. So, I think Leaky's the only guy, which we'll hit on here in a second as well, that has been here for all 4 years. You know what I mean? It has been around the program for a long time. But I thought they both played well. Obviously, like I said, Brady Manick led the way with those 22 points, also had 5 boards as well. And you had Leaky Black. He's not a guy that's going to fill up the stat sheet by any means, but 8 points, 7 boards, 7 assists for Leaky Black, just 2 turnovers for him as well. I thought he had a really, really good all-around game. Like I said, he's not a guy that's going to be extremely impressive when you look at the stat sheet, but if you can get 8, 7, and 7 from Leaky every night, you're going to be loving that from what you can get in terms of production from him. So I thought Leaky played really well. I thought Brady Manick had another big game, hit some big shots, shot 50% from 3 and the floor. I thought he was like he has been so many times this season, just a great offensive weapon for them. But I think on senior night, it's only right we hit on it. Brady Manick and Leaky really stepped up. If this is the last we actually see of Leaky Black in the Smith Center. Because AJ, based on what you were trying to pull out of him and some other things he said, I'm not quite convinced on it. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, he put the ball on the tee. It was kind of easy to swing through it and pull an Eddie Murray on him, right?
Yeah.
I'll get to that in a second. One thing that's not going to be in the stat line is the forced turnover against Buddy Boeheim on the inbound play in the last minute. In fact,
big play.
I thought it was a curious decision by Hubert when he put Leaky on Swider about 6 minutes left, and Hughes immediately went to Buddy Boeheim, and he had Caleb on him. And you know, for Hubert, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you don't move Leaky over to Swider, and he keeps hitting shots, and he goes for 42, and he did go for 36. I mean, if he would have gone for 39, Tar Heels lose this game probably.
Yeah.
So he had to do something, and it actually did take him a little bit out of his rhythm when he did that. And that was kind of so. In the end, he was successful doing what he did. Buddy started going a little bit, but they had that timeout, and he subbed in Puff for Caleb, put Puff on Cole Swider, and put Leaky back on Buddy. And Leaky's length and denying on the inbound forced a turnover. I think it was the biggest play of the night because it looked like they were in trouble.
Yeah,
and I think that was the possession that was right before Caleb hitting the three.
Yep.
That gave Carolina a 2-point lead with 8 seconds left. So, you know, last year in the first half, Buddy Boeheim went for 18 in this building, and then Leaky was clamped down on him in the second half. He held him scoreless. He only held him to 3 shot attempts. Tonight, before the switch was made, Buddy had 8 points, and he was really having to work for it. And he had 5 in the first half and 3 there in his first 15 or so, 14 minutes of the second half. He had 8 points. And in that span of 55 game minutes, Boeheim had scored 8 points total in this building with Leaky guarding him. I mean, Leaky just has him. He's got him figured out. And he said tonight it's a great challenge. He's a great player. And I wouldn't be surprised if Buddy Boeheim plays in the NBA for a while. He's got an NBA kind of game. Regardless of what the draft board say, I ignore those. But for certain guys, he's one of them. And that was the biggest play of the game. That was one of those plays that he made it, and you're thinking, okay, this might be Carolina's night, because they had to make little plays that are actually big plays in order to win this game because they were unable to shake Syracuse. I thought they were going to shake them late in the first half, and you come out of the start of the second half and say, okay, boom, put your foot on the throat. They didn't do that. Syracuse came out and started strong, start the second half, and it was nip and tuck the rest away. By the way, it kind of reminded me of an old-time ACC game. I used to cover a lot of games, and when the buildings used to be full all the time, and the league was much better than it is in this transition period it's in right now. And this kind of reminded me a lot of those games. But man, Leaky was huge. He hit a couple big early threes.
Yeah, he loves that.
He had some big offensive rebounds in this game. You know, you can't. It's hard to not pull for a guy like him. He's such a likable guy. For me, I actually had a relation, I was building a relationship with him, journalist to player before the pandemic. I don't know the other guys as well. So I kind of feel like I know Leaky a little bit more than the other ones. And it's not hard to root for him. To see him do good things is certainly a positive. And what you were alluding to, he kind of, someone asked him about senior night. And he said, well, good to see Brady do that in his last game in here. And he's like, well, he kind of hemmed and hawed.
Yeah, he started whining a little bit, yeah.
I mean, he opened up the door and said, guys, somebody asked me a follow-up on this, and I was next.
Swept right in, yeah.
I was like, well, Leaky, I wouldn't plan on asking you about this, but you just kicked the door open, so what can you tell us? He's like, in person, pre-COVID, if we were doing normal interviews, I probably would have pressed a little bit more or gone back to him maybe off the record and just said, hey, when are you going to go and announce it? I wouldn't have told anybody. I just would want to know so we could prepare.
Yeah.
Never want to spoil a kid's moment in recruiting or something like that. But you probably, if anybody sees that, watch his interview on our channel.
Go watch his press conference on our YouTube
I'm sure
channel.
You'll come to the conclusion that Leaky, will have something to say here at some point in the next few weeks. So
definitely something.
And that's cool. One of the great things about the extra year, a lot of people didn't like it at first, but that gave Brady Manick the opportunity to be here for a year and experience this culture and be so embraced that he has here. And quite frankly, he's a damn good player.
Really good player.
He had 3 more assists tonight. We talked about his assists the other day. He's got 55 now. That's double than he had in any season in Oklahoma. And he was a 30-minute a game guy there. So he started 111 of 122 games. So we've seen so much of his game come out, and it was good to see him have a big performance in his last home game here as well. But Jacob, it didn't look like maybe this was their last game in this building for a while. There were times where you think, wow, because if they would have lost tonight, and I know we're going to hit on this here in a second, they would have lost tonight. They'd probably be back here in a few weeks unless they win the thing in Brooklyn next week. But to see the seniors make big plays, Brady had a big bucket in overtime. It's a big late baskets. Leaky with the turnover, forced turnover on Boeheim. The old guys stepped up when they needed them to.
Yeah. No, they really did. They really did. Let's move on to the last thing I want to hit on, AJ, as we always kind of do, what this means, looking ahead a little bit. Obviously, it's a huge win for Carolina's NCAA tournament resume. Another kind of must win for them is one they just really couldn't afford to lose, especially with, Syracuse's struggles this year, and obviously Carolina playing at home, and with Duke coming up on Saturday. SEC tournament's coming up next week. Obviously, that Duke game is the last game of the regular season for the Tar Heels. So, AJ, what does it mean? Because I would think this Syracuse win all but solidifies Carolina's spot somewhere in the NCAA tournament, irregardless of what they do potentially in Durham and in Brooklyn. Now, I say that as a caveat, not very confidently, is because, if Carolina goes into Durham and doesn't play well like we've seen at times this year, like we saw in Chapel Hill, about a month ago against Duke, and then goes to Brooklyn and maybe loses their first game. I know they did secure the double bye today in the tournament. Then maybe, who knows what kind of conversation we'll have then. But this was a huge win. And this in itself, just focusing on what we do know as a definite, this was a very, very important win for the Tar Heels heading into Saturday and heading into the postseason starting next week.
Had they lost this game, I think they would need to win the tournament in Brooklyn. So one side of it, you could say, yes, the risk, losing this game, the negative side of that would be dramatic. I don't think the win is the same thing on the other side. I think this just gets them one step closer. Beating Syracuse in overtime at home isn't going to wow anybody. It's not a very good Syracuse team. They don't defend very well. That zone is what it is, but it's, their defensive efficiency rating is like 223. It's not a very good team. They have some nice players, but they're jump shooters except Buddy. Buddy's got a pro game. The rest of those guys are chuckers. Swider's career high before this was 26, like 3 years ago at Villanova, in a year in which he only scored more than 13 twice. So it's not like this is his usual thing. So this is a really good win because it would have been a devastating loss. That's what this means. They're one step closer. They can't afford to go into Durham and get rolled. Their average margin of defeat, 17 points. When you look at the NET, only two teams ranked ahead of them in the NET have a quad 4 loss. And I think San Francisco is one of them. Carolina has a quad 4 loss, and Pitt's going to stay a quad 4 loss. So you have a quad 4 loss, and right now, no earth-shattering wins. Their only Q1 win is Virginia Tech team that's probably not going to be in the field unless they do a lot of damage here in the next 10 days, 12 days. So this is just one step closer. That's what this means. I think it's some relief because these kids they've won 4 in a row now. And goodness, if you just think about that Pitt game, man, everybody in this building would like to have that back, but you can't. But they can make amends for it this weekend when they go to Duke. And we're going to do a preview pod later on in the week looking ahead to that game. It is a winnable game, by the way, going into Durham. It's a winnable game. Those Duke kids are going to hear nothing but questions about K. Not going to hear anything about Carolina. And here comes a pretty solid team that's playing its best basketball in a lot of ways. Hubert said tonight that their chemistry is better now than it has been all year long. I think that they are comfortable with who they are. Just don't complain about the bench because that's what it is. At least you had confidence and versatility coming off the bench tonight with Puff. And that's 3 straight games you've gotten that guy. So if you can at least get that off the bench, just embrace it because that's who they are. If this club makes a run, they're going to make a run, like I said last week, with a lot of 37s and 38s next to players' names in minutes played. Tonight, 4 of the starters were over. 4 of the guys, like Caleb didn't start tonight because it was senior night, but 4 of the players were well into the 40s. So that's who they are. And if they could play with the kind of cohesion and defend a little bit better, this is a very, very dangerous team starting this weekend and moving on. So, Duke has been pushed at home a few times, and I think Carolina's better than the teams that push them at home. And certainly when Carolina's playing well, it can play at a very high level in the stretches. Its problem is they kind of coast in a stretch, and then they push, and then they're bad, and then they coast, then they push. They're kind of all over the place.
Consistency is an issue,
yeah. There is no such thing as a 40-minute game for this team as far as efficiency and production. But I do think the 40 minutes were there in effort today. Even when they pushed ahead, I don't think Syracuse came back because Carolina let up, which has been an issue at times before. I think the full emotional investment was there tonight. I think the full mental investment was there tonight. And in a lot of there were times where they were a beautiful team. So I think they feel pretty good. I think that they're going into Duke. If they can win that game, they're in.
Yeah, that's a
they
lock
could lose They could lose in the quarterfinals in Brooklyn. They're still in. If they don't beat Duke this weekend, if they get rolled, they're going to have to win twice in Brooklyn, and then they have to be competitive at some point against a really good team. They were competitive with Purdue. That was more than 3 months ago. They were competitive with Notre Dame on the road, which looks like a pretty good team now, but Carolina still should have won that game. I think if they would have been in the right mindset, they would have been the better team that night. Notre Dame didn't know who it was yet then. Mm-hmm. And that win kind of helped Notre Dame on that course. So what does this mean? It just means they won another game. They have 20. They're North Carolina. Winning, yeah. They're 22-8. They're 14-5 in the ACC. They're nowhere near the rankings, and they are the ultimate NCAA fence team because a lot of people don't want to see them get in.
Yeah,
a lot of people want to use what happened with the NCAA stuff, thinking they got away with murder. All that kind of junk saying, well, the NCAA, they lawyered up and the NCAA couldn't punish them, so let's punish them now, keeping them out. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to get into that. We were spot on covering that for several years. We were 100% right on that and why it didn't happen and what the facts were. Doesn't matter. But there are people talking about that. Like that won't die. Too. Mm-hmm. So the committee's going to have a lot of pressure. If they're on the fence with Colorado State or San Francisco or whoever else, Memphis or Indiana, who nearly blew a huge season-ending type of game yesterday at Minnesota, I don't think they're going to get as much benefit of the doubt as other people do. So they can take care of business by finishing strong, going to Durham, and at least being competitive and winning a couple games in Brooklyn. I think they'll be in good shape. But if they would have lost tonight, we'd be back in here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely big win for the Tar Heels. We've been saying it it seems like forever now, half the season, but it's got to keep winning games if they want to get in the tournament.
When you lose by 18 points a game against the really good teams that you play,
put yourself in
and you do it as much as this team has, and you don't really have any of those wins, you put yourself in position to have to win big game after big game after big game at this time of year. It's stressful. Armando acknowledged the anxiety, but I think in a way it might be kind of fun for some of these guys because, by the time they get to Brooklyn, they've already been playing postseason type games in a lot of ways. Their mindset and the fear of loss, especially since the Pitt game, they've had that, and they've had to grind some out, man.
Mm-hmm. So they definitely have, yeah.
They've proven they can do that. They haven't beaten a lot of really good teams, but they're grinding them out. Mm-hmm. When was the last time they lost a grind out game? Pitt had a 20-point lead with 10 minutes left. That wasn't a grind out.
That was a blowout in a lot of ways for most of that game.
Yeah. So they're winning the grind out games. They got a little extra layer there when at crunch time, and his name is Caleb Love.
Yeah, it really is.
The first. Yeah, so
it really is.
I can't wait till we do our pre-Duke pod because we're going to get into this a lot more then.
Yeah, no, there'll be a lot to talk about in that podcast. So make sure you guys keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com and, of course, our YouTube channel as well, Tar Heel Illustrated. For that, we'll have that out later this week. But for tonight, Carolina getting an 88-79 win over Syracuse, fending off the regular season in a good fashion way for Carolina. They were a good team at home for the most part. There's a couple games they want to have back this year, but for the most part, capping off what was a pretty good regular season in the Dean Dome for the Tar Heels. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Make sure you guys keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com. You sign up, link in the description below for just $8.33 a month. Great time to do so, AJ, is football season. Well, spring practice, I should say, is literally right around the corner.
9 hours.
Yeah.
Spring practice starts at 9 hours.
9 hours, guys. So if you want to get involved, great time to do it ahead of spring ball because there's just so many things that go on spring ball and so many tidbits we'll be putting on the board during it. If you want access to that, guys, really, seriously, get signed up ahead of tomorrow because that will be going full force.
Brandon and I will be there. We'll have a lot of stuff.
Yeah. lot of stuff's going to come from that. So like I said, sign up $8.33 a month, link in the description below. Like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well so you know every single time we upload. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.